the coding side of the GMS RSVP system. It's very lightweight, and I haven't aimed at making anything complex. I've tried to keep this as simple as possible. It's pretty much just one step up for me to static website. So instead of having a static website, this is a very lightweight way for me to quickly set up a system using a MVC inspired structure, but there's nothing very complex about it. In the bootstrap file is in your root directory is your settings to link to your database and set your site path and your RSVP path, because you have your root folder, then you also have your RSVP system, which is sort of built into this whole system. I've set it as for RSVP because that's the URL I use. You might want to actually change that to a different URL, and then the system will know that that is the file path structure it needs to follow. So some things that you should keep in mind to set is the from email name. These are when people submit, they get a notification email, and it will be sent from this email address. This system is also set up to do environment sniffing. So it will check, is it on the live URL, then use those settings. Is it on the test URL, then use those settings. Else, you can assume that it's on a local URL, so use those settings. The index file is left as blank. The htaccess is what forces someone who is viewing the index file into the public folder. So there's no root access for anyone else. Everyone gets pushed into the public, and then from the public, the system collects files in the root directory. So from here, it'll load an auto-load class, which just allows for auto-loading of classes in the system, and then a bootstrap class, which is the class above the bootstrap where we set all our environment variables. Anything ahead of in the URL gets turned into variables, which is then sent through to the system and turned into your views and your controllers. So it sends the URL through to views, which will then generate the view, and then it sends the URL through to controllers, which will then load the matching controller. So in this case, if we go to the root, it'll be your default because it'll go through as blank. Else, if we have /start, for example, which is how it usually ends. So let's say we're in BIC and we go /default. It's going to go to the login if you haven't logged in yet. If you have logged in, I've set it up to forward you to start, which means it's now going to look for a start controller, there, start.php in the controllers, and a start folder in the views. So it's going to by default load index. But you can have a page, so you want it to be, the URL to be start /message. It's going to load the start controller, and then it's going to load the message method. So if you need to set up that kind of structure, you just go to your controller, which is start. I'll come back to it, but it's going to run your /method, which is message, which in this case is blank. How the system is set up, if you want to have a /message, you are going to have to just put a blank method in, else it will throw an error. So let's say I put in, I want to do a /test. Then it's just going to default back to start. You put in here PHP file, test.php. So we're just going to add a method and go function test. And now, sorry, I just had to switch to my localhost. So I've added that test and it loads the test file. By default, it runs the header and footer in the template parts folder. So it'll run this footer and this header unless I put an underscore control. So it's not going to load a default header for the method, but it'll load a default header for the controller. So if I want to create a new controller, and I want this entire controller to be called test. So I add test, and I create a class for the name. So with each controller you create, you need to create a original default construct and run. So for example, RSVP is just pretty much there so that I can load front-end files for it. It's not a back-end driven system at all. So if you want to extend this system with some Angular functionality or whatever, and you just want to create a blank page, then just create a controller like this, like test, and put in a construct and a run. And then you'll be able to go back, and if you don't create a matching view file, it throws a error. So what you need to do is just remember to create, like most of these systems, you need a matching view folder structure with an index. Okay, and then if you refresh, you say this is a test controller. And then if you wanted to load custom headers and footers, just create a header underscore test. So if I had to add a default footer file, the footer test will now have no header or footer logo. So it will literally just be the index file loading with a blank header and a blank footer. So that allows for a bit of customization in the system. It's really simple, like I say, it's really lightweight. It just allows for simplistic structural changes. If you need to extend, it should be fairly simple. You just have a look at the core files. Have a look at how I've set up my framework. So there's a framework folder in classes, and here you'll see the controller's instructions on how to run the controllers is in controllers.php file. How to root everything is in the routing file, so that's how it's going to root to URL structure. So you'll see URL is exploded using /, and then it loads sections and actions based on that. So your section would be like test, and your action would be test / run test. And that would be run test method in your test class. And if you want to have a look at how the views are created, just go into underscore views.php file, and then you'll see it's pretty simple. It just sends through a section value, which we just saw it creates through the URL, action value, which can be blank, and then any arguments. So that's anything after. So you'll have your section, your action, and then anything after that gets turned into your arguments. So I have extended it a bit over time with my own extensions. For example, the login functionality, it's a static class, so you can call it anywhere in the system. I've called it in the start on the construct. I've said if not logged in, there's a checked logged in method in the login class. You see, I have another functionality that I've extended. It's a post class. This is in the part of the framework. All this does is it fetches variables that have been passed to the system. So here it just takes a post server call, cleanses it using a built-in database class, and then returns the variables, the post variables cleansed.